There is something rather funny. Today, a dog can lie on its back on the sofa, wearing a sweater, waiting for you to call it your little darling. Some even have their own birthday cake. And honestly, they seem very serious about that privilege. But if we go back tens of thousands of years, their ancestors were not that cute. They were wolves. The howls in the darkness, the eyes reflecting firelight, were the teeth that made Ice Age people keep their children closer by their side. For humans at that time, wolves were not friends. Wolves were a danger. Yet somehow, wolves themselves became the creatures sleeping at the foot of our beds. And the strangest thing is, maybe no one truly invented dogs. Maybe it all began with leftover scraps, campfires, distance, and a few wolves bold enough to come closer to humans than the others. In other words, dogs may be the cutest accidental invention in human history. But to understand why this is strange, we have to remember one thing. Humans and wolves were not born to be friends. These two species lived in the same scarce world. Both needed meat, both tracked prey, both knew that a failed hunt could lead to many hungry days. For a small human group, every piece of food mattered. A wolf pack around the hunting area was not just a frightening background scene. It was a real rival. It could make prey run away, fight for a carcass, or turn a night that was already cold into one where no one dared sleep deeply. The problem is that wolves are not stupid either. They live in packs, know how to cooperate, know how to observe, and know how to wait for a safe moment. In other words, humans did not meet a weak animal that needed saving. They met a rival, smart enough to become an enemy, and precisely because of that, the fact that it gradually became an ally is hard to believe. So what pulled such a rival closer to humans? The answer may not be very romantic. Calories. Hunter-gatherers did not live in camps, as clean as documentary films or reconstructions staged after a hunt. There was always something left behind. Large bones that were hard to crack, pieces of hide, tendons, organs, fat, and bits of meat not eaten in time. For humans, those might have been leftovers. For wolves, they were a much lower risk meal than throwing themselves at a large animal fighting back. To a wolf, a human camp might have looked like a food source on the move. It moved with the seasons, smelled of smoke, and was noisy. It was dangerous, but it also left energy behind. And in nature, energy is something no species takes lightly. The ones too afraid would stay far away and get nothing, but the ones too aggressive would be driven off. Or worse, but a few in the middle were different, bold enough to come close, smart enough not to cross the line. Maybe that very group opened the first door for dogs. But the important thing was not only that they came close, the important thing was which ones were allowed to live nearby for one more day. At the edge of a human camp, every behavior had consequences. A wolf that rushed in too quickly would be seen as a threat. So would one that growled for too long, but one that knew how to stand back, wait, and observe, then retreat at the right moment, had a chance to return next time. No one needed to understand genetics for this process to happen. Humans simply did something very practical. They drove away dangerous things, tolerated the less dangerous ones. And nature did the rest over many generations. The ones that could tolerate the presence of humans could reproduce more within the groups living around camps. Being less fearful, less reactive, and less aggressive gradually became an advantage. In 1959, geneticist Dmitry Belyaev began an experiment, selecting the foxes least afraid of humans to breed. After only many generations, they were not only gentler, but also had some traits more like pets. But that experiment does not prove that dogs emerged in exactly the same way. The point here is that if you select for temperament, the body can also begin to change. But saying the body changed is one thing. Proving it after tens of thousands of years is another matter. The problem is that bones do not introduce themselves as I am a wolf or I am a dog. A slightly shorter jaw, a few smaller teeth, a strange-looking skull. All of these can be debated. Is it an early dog? Or just an ancient wolf population that disappeared? This is why the origin of dogs still has no truly clear birth date. Many very ancient specimens have been proposed, but not all of them are agreed upon. Ancient DNA helps make the story less blurry. Some recent studies show genetic evidence of dogs from around 16,000 to 11,000 or 14,000 years ago in several regions of Europe and Turkey. And by around 11,000 years ago, dogs already had several major lineages. That is very important. Because if there were already many dog lineages by then the story must have begun earlier. In other words, dogs did not appear like a switch being flipped in history. They were more like dawn, not suddenly bright all at once, but slowly emerging in the gray zone between wildness and familiarity. And once that gray zone appeared, the next question was no longer how wolves had changed, but why humans allowed them to stay. The answer may lie in very practical benefits. An animal living near the camp could hear things humans had not heard yet. It could smell a strange scent before human eyes could see. It reacted to sounds in the night, to fresh tracks, to the appearance of predators or strangers. For a group of people who always had to sleep on alert, that was no small thing. An early warning sound could be the difference between waking up in time and being too late during a hunt. These animals could also help track, smell out and chase prey, or simply make humans notice something they had overlooked. In return, they got to live near a place that was relatively more stable than the empty wilderness. There is no need to call it friendship yet. At the early stage, it was more like an unspoken contract. No one signed it. No one set rules. It was just two predatory species discovering that by staying close, both could sometimes survive better. But if the story stopped at usefulness, dogs might have been like many other animals, useful but distant. The strange thing is that they did not only live near humans, they learned to live in the world of our signals. Pointing finger, glance, a voice changing tone slightly. For many other species, those are meaningless movements, but dogs seem especially good at reading those small signs. In 2015, a study in the journal Science showed that when dogs and humans look into each other's eyes, both can have increased oxytocin, the hormone linked to social bonding. To put it simply, a dog's gaze does not only soften us in a poetic sense, it may truly touch the bonding system in the human brain. And that is not all. A 2019 study in PNAS suggested that dogs have eye muscles that developed differently from wolves, helping them create expressions that humans respond to very easily. Of course, we should not say dogs intentionally manipulate us, because thousands of years living beside humans may have turned communication into a survival advantage. At some point, dogs did not only step into human camps, they stepped into human emotions. And that emotion is not only a modern guess made by dog owners. One of the most moving pieces of evidence comes from Bonn Oberkassel in Germany. There, archaeologists found a grave about 14,000 years old. Inside were the remains of a man, a woman, and a dog. What is noteworthy is not only that the dog was buried with humans, some analyses suggest that it had suffered a serious illness when young. If this interpretation is correct, it could not have survived easily, without care. Think about that for a moment. In a world where food was not abundant, winter could kill people, and every day was an energy problem, humans could still spend time on a weak dog. A healthy dog could help with hunting, but a sick dog needed others to help it stay alive. This is when the story moves beyond utility. Perhaps we should not yet call it love, in the modern sense, but clearly it was no longer just keeping something because it was useful. An animal only needs to be useful to be kept. However, it must mean more than that, to be cared for when it grows weak. Therefore, the story of dogs is not only the story of a wolf changing shape, it is also the story of humans accidentally changing the world around them. A group of people leaving bones after a meal. A wolf standing far enough away not to be chased off. One return, then many returns over thousands of years. That distance grew shorter, from caution to tolerance, from tolerance to usefulness, from usefulness to attachment, and finally, from a creature at the edge of darkness. Dogs entered the most private places of human life. Homes, memories, sadness, habits, and even the moments when we do not want to be alone. Perhaps the strangest thing is not that wolves became dogs, but that humans became a species capable of expanding the idea of family to include another creature. If today there is a dog sleeping near you, it does not know that history, but in a very quiet way, it is still living that story onward.